Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Pete. Actually, I suppose I could count as the guest our friend Bill Mankins, who's been on the show multiple times and previously discussed his plan to build Mankins Research and Mankins University, where he plans to offer special ops-related curricula. That means a student will learn practical operational skills like flying a helicopter or a small plane, foreign languages, ballistics, logistics, field medical procedures, stuff like that. But this time, Bill turns the tables and asks the questions of old Pedro. I haven't heard it, but Bill, or Manny as Pete likes to call him, is a trained interrogator, so we'll see where it goes. It'll be fun. Now, since you listen to the Break It Down show, you care about reaching optimal performance and doing work and making sacrifices, and we all like to get the most out of our efforts in every endeavor. But I'm going to ask you to do two things to help everyone else around you. First thing is that you go out and support the charities you care about or that are making a difference that's near and dear to you. Donate some money, volunteer your time, help out. We support a few different charities, primarily Save the Brave, and you can see what they do and throw a few bucks at them if you'd like at savethebrave.org. We also support the SEAL Veterans Foundation, and you can read about what they do and support them at sealveteransfoundation.org. Now, you probably heard that Pete is doing the Coronado SEAL Memorial Swim coming up on Saturday, September 21st to benefit the families of Naval Special Warfare operators who've made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom, and they deserve all of our support. If you're in the San Diego area, you can also go check out Pete on September 21st. That is the Coronado SEAL Memorial Swim, and it'll be fun. So, second thing I'm going to ask you to do is even easier. Support the Break It Down show by giving us a simple 5-star rating and a short review, like these guys are my people. That's all. Pretty simple, huh? And we'll appreciate you like crazy. Hey, speaking of crazy, have I got a couple of chaps for you. Here's Bill Mankins and his conversation with our own Pete Turner.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner, and we're getting ground truthy on the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey everybody, we're here today. I'm getting a chance to interview my buddy Pete. My name's Bill Mankins. I've been on the show a couple times. Pete and I go way back, and I'm really looking forward to actually asking him a couple things that I don't know about him, and I don't know what he thinks, and a few things that I do know what he thinks, but I want to know why he thinks them. Here we go. It's going to be a fun show.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to, every time we talk, man, it's always a fascinating and interesting conversation. So have at it. I'm ready.
Yeah, you're in the interrogation seat, so here we go. A couple things. So Intel is your background. Why? What brought in the Intel?
It worked out that way. I would never had a plan to join the military. It just was a thing that was born out of not getting a job coming out of college. I was going to be a TV radio guy. And as I tried to find a job in TV and radio, it was just a bad time to do it in the early 90s. And quite honestly, it was a time when the industry was moving away from having white dudes wear bad sports jackets. The industry was changing. And that's not a commentary on anything other than just it was good. We needed some diversity in those roles. And so there weren't enough jobs for anybody. So I had to do something. And so instead of doing nothing, I got into the military because they would give me a chance to learn some skills.
It's funny. I didn't realize that TV and radio were something that even before the military you were interested in.
Yeah, that was my whole field to study. TV, radio, mass communication. That's my undergrad degree.
It's funny, man. All these years I've known you, I did not know that. It's just kind of surprising to me, actually. And here you are after all this, like now you're getting, you're not getting back into it. You've gotten back into it now, for over a decade. So it's being circle back around.
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought I would be in TV radio, but it was something that I was always interested in because, it was sort of a failed thing. And I really did enjoy it. I got into it for the right reasons. I just couldn't crack the nut on how to actually make it happen. And so now that it is happening, I use my degree all the time. And what a shocker. I'm as shocked about that as you are.
Yeah. So let me ask, just before we move on to other stuff, I want to harp in on that a little bit. So you did that in the 90s. This is pre-major internet for all intents and purposes, right? And I graduated from high school in 95, and I remember PineNet was like the first email service that we could use my freshman year of college. So podcasting and what you're doing now in the medium, I guess you could say that you're using, how was any of your TV and radio that you training and stuff, was this a whole, was 75% of what you talked about and learned there like applicable now, or has this been basically a total revamp and a new learning curve?
No, it applied directly. I mean, I knew how to communicate at a theoretic level, and I understood the principles of how to mass communicate and how to measure that. All of those things applied to what I did, and then you think about being a reporter, your job is to go out and find a story. And that was an area where I spent a lot of time in college. Like, I don't want to be someone, I'm not afraid to go out and go get a story. So I would make it up myself. I would find something interesting. That and a sales job combined is what the kind of spy I am, is part news reporter, part salesman,
Yeah, I do. It's kind of funny how those two worlds, most people don't realize how much they overlap, but they do.
Yeah.
Storytelling. So let's talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to delve back into the intel part. So, everybody's got their thing, whether it's the movies they like to watch, the TV shows. I mean, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, most accurate, but it's how I'm thinking about it at the moment, which is, there's people that like horror, there's people that like drama, people that like romance, people that like, more action. Effectively, it's what kind of story are you attracted to in the given moment, right? That is what you want to observe or hear or get taken away by. But when you're a storyteller, there's probably, in the same way, or movie director, or any other medium, kinds of stories that maybe tend to fall into a category. So, on the intel side, there's certain stories that need to be told and explored and fleshed out. But just overall, and then what you're doing now and kind of where you think you might be going in the future, is there for lack of a better word, I'll say genre, or a type of story that you're more interested in telling or researching than a different type of story? Or any that you are clearly not interested in telling or bored about?
Hey, this is Pete. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support of Save the Brave, a certified nonprofit 501c3 with a charter of helping veterans with post-traumatic stress. Here's how you can help. Go to savethebrave.com, click on the link on the website, and my recommendation is this: subscribe. Give them $20 a month. You've got subscriptions that you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out. Get involved. Let's help these folks out.
Or any that you are clearly not interested in telling or bored about?
If it's in terms of what I do now, I am looking for things that force me to be uncomfortable mentally and emotionally, those guys, spiritually, physically.
Yeah.
How do I get into a conversation that forces me to adapt to an uncomfortable, even if it's not my reality? And you and I know about experiencing other realities. When I experience those things, I grow tremendously. And so that's really the story. Like, where's the growth? I know now, in terms of the show, I know now that my nose works. I've developed it. I can find a story that makes sense, which is really true for what I did with the commander too. I knew the commander's main tasks. I can tell you what any commander in the field wants to do right now. I already know their mission, even though I don't know who I'm even talking about or where they're at. I still know what their mission is, because I have a nose for that. And so I've got that same kind of thing, not with the same level of clarity, because the big bad world's a whole different place and it's a lot more complex, but I know what the audience likes because the audience is me.
Mm-hmm. Knowing the right story and knowing the right story, the questions to ask, I think really, when you're a storyteller, you can't be it into some way unless you're a researcher too. And that falls in line, with both of our backgrounds. And when you're talking about the commander, and you might not know him, but you're thinking about the story to tell and what they might need to know. Question for you about needing to know. Do you think that part of your skill is just in general with question asking that may be a little different and broader? And let me give you an example of a totally different field, which is business, right? So you hear people will look at a conventional question, the standard cliche one is with McDonald's, what business are you in? And people are thinking about it in a certain way. And then somebody comes along who thinks unconventionally and says, no, we're not in the restaurant business, we're in the real estate business or whatever else. Or people who think they're in the sports business and no, I'm in the entertainment business, meaning they have a greater capacity to understand the context and to contextualize what they're in. Mm-hmm. And that person tends to be rather rare because it's much easier to, think conventionally. That's what everybody else does. And so when you can reframe what you're doing or ask the right questions to encourage said leader or boss or group or enterprise to reframe what they're doing and think bigger and more strategically. I think that's what you do, man. You're just a rare bird in that way.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for what you're talking about. I guess the best way to characterize this without getting too esoteric or anything is my job is to go out and find out the unknown unknowns. So if I go out and I always try to build a reading list when I'm doing spy stuff. So I'm always trying to make sure that the intel shop, the operations, all of the operations people, anybody on staff has access, and I'm checking that they're actually reading the reports because everybody gets overwhelmed with things to read. Like your email box fills up like as you're sitting there, it's like bling, bling, bling. So you have to stand out. And that's sort of what I do with the podcast. But in terms of the combat world, I build a reading list, and then one of my, to use a business term, one of my KPIs is when I go out on a patrol with, a combat unit. And when I come back and they read my report and they're like, that is not what happened, then I know I've done my job. Mm-hmm. And I guess I should explain that to the audience. I experienced a different reality than that unit did, because I'm going to use this example. When I host, yes, I listen to the guest, but I'm listening for things, not to things. So I'm not listening to the person. Yes, I hear every word they say, but I'm listening for specific areas where I can now open up truth that if you're not listening, you just hear talking and it just skims across the surface. So I'm listening for certain areas where I can go, bam, right there. I now know which 15 questions I need to ask. And I'm highly prepared for these moments. So if it's a farmer talking about poppies, I know the 10 questions I need to ask to get better information than anybody else. And I'll say this boldly, but it's true. Anybody in that entire province, I can now outperform all of them combined.
Mm-hmm. Because of the questions.
Because of the questions. Yeah, the questions are because I've listened for the moment to ask the right questions. So it's one thing to ask like, hey, where are the bombs? I actually could find out where the bombs are because I don't say where are the bombs. I listen for the 15 things before that. Yeah. And I go, this guy might, and he may not know where the bombs are, but now I can go right now. I can work this guy for threat. I can work this guy for farming issues. I can work this guy for money issues. And I've got a question set for any of those things. So when I do, and I've tried to explain this in the past, maybe this will make sense to you, but I reverse conversation, like I reverse plan my conversation. So if my question is ultimately where are the bombs, what's the question before that?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the question before that? And what's the question before? And you work all the way out down this very natural path. And so when I literally say to someone, hey, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. If I ask something you don't want to answer, let me know. Well, my job is now to make sure every question I ask is super simple. And they're like, yeah, that's no big deal. I'll tell you that. And then I can press them within that and say, really, no shit. Come on. What's the real answer? And when that person I'm talking to does the international sign, and he looks over their shoulder and they go, all right, I'll tell you what. Now I know I'm in a special place that nobody else can get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So rapport.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's one of those things, again, different fields have it. Could be sales and business. It could be in our field of intel. It's effectively the same thing. Whether you're selling yourself, you're selling an idea, you're selling a vision, you're selling the reason why they need to tell you the truth.
That's right.
It's funny because you've been through various training schools, the same with myself. And in my personal experience, and I want to hear your thoughts, a lot of times the rapport building is something that's kind of talked about in theory. And then people gloss over it because it just seems kind of like, it's sort of the soft man's game or that it was. But to me, in what you've done, like the capacity to develop that relationship with people and make people who normally would not trust you is like coin of the realm.
Yeah.
And the textbook method for how to do that is not necessarily, well, it's not something that just everybody can do. And it's not something that's easily trainable, because there's some degree of personality and just natural, actually caring that can't really be faked. And I mean, I don't know if you think this way, but my personal opinion is most of and you're obviously in this group, man, but most of the best intel collectors that I know are people who actually really care. They're in that question of willing to go ask questions and develop that uncomfortable relationship and try to understand that other person. And so I'm curious, I mean, you've taught in the schoolhouse, right? I don't know if our listeners know that about you. It's another one of those things about your background, but I mean, you've taught the course.
Yeah.
And how much of that rapport building as a teacher, even watching students, how much of that do you think is actually the percent, right? Mm-hmm. That is trainable and not trainable? How much of that is personality based versus coachable? It's the same thing in sales, right? And in the same way.
It's a tough question to know that. So I would say this. First off, I've never seen a training manual that gives you an idea of what rapport looks like and how to reliably and repeatedly. I've not seen an institutional program of rapport building. That's what I'm going to say. So that's always on the agent, of collection. I'm not saying special agent, just the person who's gathering that information to figure that out. You can be given some ideas, but the bottom line is nobody knows how to do that at an organizational level. And that's a problem, because it's an exceptionally desirable outcome to be able to say, I can create a relationship that is founded in, and I would say before you can ever get to trust, and I know a lot about trust. I spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And Robin Dreek also is a great resource for this. He's been on the show a couple times. He's an FBI counterintelligence agent. And both of us understand that if you lead with trust and respect, and you have rapport ahead of that, you actually will get to trust sooner than you think. But if you don't lead with those things and you don't test for trust, you don't have trust. Like, trust is earned, and it's earned. The coin of the realm, again, is that respect and that rapport. And so if you have, and rapport is not, let's talk about your kids for 5 minutes. I won't tell you anything about me, and then I'm going to tell you what my commander wants. That's not rapport, not in any part of the world. Mm-hmm. So you have to get over, and rapport does not really involve ego. And that breaks, our peers' hearts, and they're like, no, you don't understand. Like, well, no, I understand plenty. This does not involve your ego at all. This is about them, and they don't have to give you trust. So it's not an easy thing to explain or describe, but for sure, I have a huge advantage in that I got to watch my peers as an instructor. I got to watch them struggle with realities of what you can and can't ask someone to do in a conflict zone, because they're not equipped to give you everything you want. It's dangerous for them. And until you can accept that you don't matter in terms of their daily well-being, then you're irrelevant on the battlefield. Honestly, like, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. How much do you think, it's funny, the rapport building part of that, we talked about it in terms of the asset you're trying to develop, but also, to use, as you said this before, with the commander, like the home team, because for what you're doing, and same things that both of us have done, is if you're an intelligence advisor, you're in this odd position of having to have no command authority.
Yeah.
And you're effectively you're the in-between. You are the literally go-between person who has to develop rapport with the native, knowledge of the native, and rapport with the unit, rapport with the, to get them to both sides to trust you in order to do this translation of reality that is able to be beneficial. So we already talked about how little rapport building, and the manual's not there. How much rapport building is actually time spent with rapport with the unit, rapport with the commander, rapport with the home team?
Over 50% of my time I designated for working with the home team, because they weren't supposed to get what I do. And I have a lot of bad news that I bring in. And if I don't account for the staff, they'll kill me. If I don't have relevance with the commander, they'll kill me. If I don't win the confidence of my immediate military partner, whoever, like some captain, that person will kill me. So it's much more dangerous on that side of things. And every day they're going out and they're making mistakes. So most of my impact is in getting the unit to stop with their misorientation, with their myopic way of looking at things, with their lack of cultural understanding. Like, I can do so much more good for them in that realm than anything else. It really, it's crazy to think of that, but it just remains true that I have to always focus on the military side because they're the ones making the most mistakes and have the least amount of relevance on people staying alive. The battlefield means nothing to the locals because they're worried about being awake the next day or their kids being safe.
Yeah. Do you think with the way that rapport works with the commanders of that unit? Well, let me back up even. So for the sake of the audience, it sounds like, and to give you an idea of what this is like, because there really isn't anything that I can think of in the civilian world like this particular kind of position, but it'd almost be like a consultant. So companies hire consultants to come in and basically advise them on what to do and come up with a system or plan or to test various things and tell them how to tweak. And Six Sigma is a perfect example, and these other kind of things. But the difference is the company itself hires the consultant and therefore has already said, we see there's value in here, and there doesn't need to be a sale or convincing. But this would be like somebody outside the company hired the consultant, told them to come over to your company, and then you're there trying to convince both the company and the people involved there that you actually have value added and can contribute to what they're doing. And I think that's a very, I mean, I can't think of another, and maybe you can, I don't know, Pete, you work with the Silicon Valley folks as well, but the most consulting does not work that way. It definitely does not.
No, it definitely doesn't. And it becomes a real problem because the ability to integrate is expensive if I'm integrating with the customer more than I'm integrating with the problem. Mm-hmm. And it remains to be true that is where the bulk of my work, because if I can get you to be more efficient as an organization through, like everybody says, and you know about this cultural stuff, like culture just doesn't tolerate design. Oh, our culture is this. Is it? I mean, I'll go for free right now and I'll go see if I can find it, Because if it's not what you think it is, guess what it is? It's way more expensive than I would be at $300 an hour or whatever it's going to be. I mean, you could spend $1 million and I could come back and give you 8. No problem at all. And I don't need $1 million to do this, but just for numbers, I'm positive I can return 8 to 1 on what I cost. And here's the thing with all of this stuff, whether it's in business or a commander, and this is what commanders taught me. I don't need you to solve my problems. I need you to illustrate them. I have the resources and the know-how to solve my problems better than you ever could. And so I would refuse to provide answers to my commanders, but I would provide them ground truth because that was infinitely more valuable until they begged me, like, what do you think we should do? And I'm like, I can't outdo the staff. I'm glad to be part of the staff and contribute, but I am not the commander, and the most the commanders got it. They're like, I absolve you of all that. I want to know what you think specifically. And then you move to a higher level because now I'm not just a consultant. I don't know. I'm just this hybrid consultant / expert of sorts, if that makes sense.
It is. I mean, you end up being a framer of reality.
Yeah.
Of understanding. And again, we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but adding a color or adding dimension to understanding. Yeah, it's a big deal. I think that's, one of the beauties of the storytelling, to tie that back in too.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's, now with what you're doing, when you talked about the illustrator with the commanders, is there anything, in terms of the medium, is where I'm going with this, the podcast, the documentary, the podcast that's just audio, the podcast that's the YouTube, is there a way that you think tends to be better for telling certain types of stories or dealing with certain clients than others?
One of my favorite things to do when I go to a new unit, if someone gave me a sack of money and says, help me out with my unit right now or company, is I would go to their planning meeting and I would see how they communicate. The Army, we love PowerPoint slides. And I would look at them and I would see like it's like a Terminator. And I would look and I'd see, okay, how are they accounting for the human dimension here? I see them going out. They're conducting medical operations to give shots and, vaccines and all these kind of things. But I don't see them ever going back to this area. I see them making assumptions about their impact. Right. And I'm really big on the affect over the effect. I see all kinds of effect, but I see no affect. This goes back to not listening to someone, but listening for something. So I'm listening and I'm looking for emotion. And so if I need to convey that in a video, or if I need to convey that in written word or whatever, then I pull up my multimedia guide and I try to do it. There's certain, and I'm not a master of this, it'd be great to have someone who's really a great artist improve what I'm doing and give me the, because there's people that know, like, this color, not just this color of pink, but this specific Pantone number creates this. There's people that know that stuff. So
yeah,
I would want to have those kind of tools at my discretion. So mostly what I do, because I'm more of a salesman than anything else, is I talk and I say, these are the things that I see. How do you all want to make this decision? And I just ask questions and I test for reactions and I test for trust. And I try to exchange trust wherever I can. It's one thing to give it, but can I get it back? And so as I get that trust back, I know I'm creating some emotional bonds, and I try to find the best medium for that, because being a multimedia person gives you some skill, but you do have, for me, the spoken word, face-to-face communication is my most emotive way to communicate that I've found.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. How would it be different? So I'm going to say two things and then we'll hit them. One, a North Korea, a China, an Iran. We'll come to that in a second. So a lot of times, here's where I'm going with this. A lot of times people have said, oh, yeah. There's the group that, counterinsurgency stuff, all this, like, dealing with indigenous people in really remote places that are totally different cultures than ours from, like, Bible times, right? The standard cliche.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not doing those things again. So all this stuff you're talking about is irrelevant. So it's a counter to that to say, how is this human dimension important in a conventional war with North Korea? How's it important in a potential war with China or in Iran? That's one aspect, because it's how do you do your sales in this human stuff, and how is it important? And then the second one is on the business side, or any consulting you might do, how is what you do most relevant to that? So we're going to tie this thing that people, it's easy in my view for people who particularly were super operational in the GWAT and the post 9/11 world to have this, I don't want to say get relegated, but get put into a position where they are viewed as being, oh, that was that thing we did, like people did with Vietnam. And so now we don't do that stuff. And so all this stuff you're talking about is irrelevant. I totally reject it. I know you do too.
Yeah.
So it's a way for our listeners to understand, okay, how is this relevant to the projected new stuff with state on state, conventional, and in a business environment with potential people who might be hiring you?
Oh, that is
I know it's a lot.
That's a big question.
Well, it's two questions, so just hit one on one.
All right, give them to me one at a time so I can get a hold of it here.
Sure. State on state.
Okay.
How is the human dimension dealing with this human connection, human persuasion, your art? How is this applicable to the United States having intelligence advisors working with a North Korean war?
Yeah, so even in a conventional war, at some point it stops, right? And then something comes after that. And I'm big on transition operations. So whatever that thing is, if it's not coin, it's nation building. Let's just put it in the big nation building bucket. That means at some point, somebody who's Korean has to believe in a system that's replaced the old system. And if you aren't able to, and this it does not matter what people say about tanks and everything else, the civil population is the center of gravity. If you cannot influence them, and it doesn't mean that you have to win hearts and minds for you, it has to mean you have to create hearts and minds for the establishment, for the nation building target. So if it's North Koreans, they don't know. Look at our specter of racism and what reality is in terms of how races interact. Like those things are wholly out of whack. I'm not saying that there's not a racial problem, but the specter is much bigger than the problem. And the same thing would apply in North Korea. So if you can't work with some cultural acuity, with some proven institutional style trust building skills, you cannot reliably create the outcome that you want to create. So great, you smashed their tank division. By the way, North Korea has no petrol. Like they have no ability to move their tanks anyhow. So You beat up on a foe that is never going to fight you in that fashion effectively. They're going to fight you in another way. And here's the thing. Here's the illustration for that. I've been in the headquarters in Baghdad, the whole shebang, all of Iraq. And I've watched, billions of dollars of equipment and college degrees come to a grinding halt over munitions that we would think were trash, garbage. Couldn't even get $50 for them, and watch it grind an entire army to a stop, to go, why do we deal with this old Korean era shell, right? So I can outmaneuver all that with my ability to deal with people and to get people to do certain things, to give a commander the tools to create those same affects. It doesn't matter how many people you kill. It matters, like, if you want to leave, and you want to leave in a way that makes some sense, you have to stay for a while, and you have to establish things like a fire department, a police department that people will actually call, a way to actually safely move money so you're not paying half the money you have to get. You don't have to pay half of your money to get that money. Like, you can just use it through a bank. Those things. How about electricity? Conventional war does not account for getting people electricity. I'm not saying that we have to pay for it, but if you don't account for those things, there will be no stability, so you may as well not go.
Mm-hmm. You've heard all the hubbub recently. Everyone's sort of in that world of defense, talking about, the mega city war and the underground subway systems and just underground bunker fighting and this kind of stuff, subterranean. Totally get it. I'm certainly not knocking it. All that stuff is real.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think. I would posit that the more people, the actual more important the human dimension actually is. And there's, for whatever reason, I've never quite been able to understand, seemingly a belief that if you go to megacity operations, like, this human dimension somehow reduces and it becomes more, well, let's return to mechanistic. And I don't mean mechanistic as in terms of tanks. I mean mechanistic in terms of almost like mathematical certainty of if X, then Y, and
right.
We do this thing that's very procedural, mechanical, and then we get victory, as opposed to, oh my God, the conversation, the complexity just got so much bigger, and it's so much bigger, not just because of the infrastructure, but even more so because of the humans that are involved and the complexity of the humans that are there and the intercity divisions of people and ethnic neighborhoods and war factions that are basing within a urban city environment. So I'm curious if you've, in any of your conversations, either with the war college people or anybody else, of this issue of the urban and the underground and how the human dimension's looked at. And if you think you've got anything to add to that, or if a different.
I've got quite a bit to say about that, and we didn't even get into the corporate part of it, which I'm glad to do. But to get into this part of it, John Spencer he's a retired major. He works at the Modern War Institute. He's been on the show several times. The three of us should probably do a show about this, because he's a leading voice in this mega city urban conflict. And as he states, and until someone proves otherwise, this remains true as well. We are becoming a more urbanized planet. Look at Houston. Houston doesn't get less urban. Houston gets more urban. And that means the things out in the southern part of Texas are also becoming less rural because Houston is getting bigger. And you look at the difference between Tucson and Phoenix. There used to be a long open desert between those two things. There is now, and I wouldn't call it urban, but it is not rural a lot of that way now. These are areas where the urbanization, you can see it. You can see it happening. San Francisco is going up. The skyline is totally different than 10 years ago. It's more urbanization. Google is about to put billions of dollars into more housing. Tracy, which is on the other side of the hill in the Bay Area, it's in the Central Valley, is part of the Bay Area now because it's getting more urban. So no doubt about it. The urban thing is what's happening. We're getting more people, and we tend to gather together. Yes, there'll always be people in the hills and in the mountains, but we're not talking about having to go fight that fight. We're talking about where there are 35 million people in one area. Look how big Mexico City is. Who wants to go fight there? Holy cow. So you have to deal with the human dimension, and all the things that you talked about are all that effect over affect, which doesn't fly. That whole inexorable victory comes from the if-then tests. If we go out and kill the top 5 people, then we will win. And so I talk about the big blue arrow in terms of the military and how they plan things. And the big blue arrow, everybody in the military has seen it. It's the arrow that goes from the bottom left-hand corner of the picture up to the upper right. And it just shows all of these operations that, lead to the point of exit and your victory. And then the next unit comes in and everything goes from being green status in the unit before to red. Everything's red. I've seen it over and over again where all of these operations happen. And then the same operations are proposed on the big giant blue arrow. So as much as anybody wants to say it at CGSC or War College or any of those things, and there's plenty of people that don't say it, the reality is this: that doesn't work. I don't know if we'll need tanks and a big Russian or China army confrontation. I don't know. I mean, maybe. You hate to say that would never happen, but the bulk of our engagements for the last 50 years, you can go to the last 70 years, the bulk of them have been something other than mechanized attacks. I mean, how many tanks did we kill in Vietnam? How many Vietnamese tanks did we kill? It just doesn't happen very often. So these are different kinds of fights now, and it's even less. Nobody wants to have another 50,000 dead young service members from America. We can't tolerate 4,000. That's a month in World War II, So we're just not going to fight that way. We don't like it. If we have to, I guess we do. But the reality is the human dimension is paramount. The ability to work with an interpreter is a critical skill that we have no capacity to create reliably. And so if we're going to go to a place like North Korea or Iran, being able to communicate, and you're not going to learn, you can because you're great at languages, but I'm not going to be able to learn Urdu, Pashto, any of the languages that you might have to learn to communicate in that whole region. I mean, Dari and Urdu are not the same, but they're different. But I'd rather have someone who's a pro in that culture, who knows it innately, and use their brain as like a two-brain system when I talk to my partner.
Mm-hmm. On the things that you bring and how you would interact with a company, I don't know, XYZ, Acme, it's always fun, calls you up and says, hey, we want you to come in and, do what? So the question is, what kind of thing do you think that would be on your menu? And how would you do that in a way that's similar or different from what you do in a military environment?
I think I would want to define problem, and that problem can even be, we know we've got a problem with culture because we don't study it, and we would love to figure out how to do that. Then I could sit back and help them understand what it is that they're trying to figure out. But the thing that I always need to do this stuff, and I'm positive you would echo this, is I need top cover. I need the tippity top. I need that CEO to say, no, I want him there, and we're not going to violate his trust because I have to build trust. So if I'm always worried about someone above the HR person undermining my trust, and then they go and they circumvent it and they reveal something about what I find out, because I'm going to find out bad news. Like if there's something bad about your company and you pay me to go find it out, guess what? You're going to find it out. Like I'm going to go get it. Like if you want to find out about your culture, you're going to get in grisly ground truth detail what your culture is at your company. And then you can start to go, holy cow, we've never thought about this before. We've never dealt with this. How do we do it? And then we start the process of how do you shape culture? Because if you start building culture, you're tearing down a bunch of stuff that already exists. And I'm a big believer in the infrastructure of the mind. And so I would want to mind map as much as possible that company internally. And in this case, I'm using an internal problem. You could do it externally, of course, but again, why not start with your own company and figure out where your own mistakes are? I'll give you an example of companies that they say they have great customer service, because most companies don't lead with, we suck at that. And then you're like, yeah, but I've used your customer service and it was horrible. You guys always say no to me. I don't expect you to always say yes, but if I bring you a problem and you never solve it, and I say to you, I expect you to fail before we start this phone call, you've got an internal problem. And you have to fix that first because you're not facing reality. So if a company wants reality, which can be hard, it's expensive to get this stuff wrong, though. You think about, there are a number of companies, I'm not a vengeful guy, but there's a number of companies that I absolutely refuse to do business with. I would only fly on United if it was the only way for me to get there. I'd rather pay someone an extra $100 to not fly on United. They've got an enormous image and culture problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think, based on military and business things you've done, how much do you think, for example, those problems, those culture things are structurally based versus personnel based versus process and communications based? And I'm thinking about this, with different, because at least in my personal experience, a lot of times there's seems to me to be some universal structure problems that I observed in the military context, that, this type of structure in organization lends itself to these kinds of mistakes just because of its inherent design.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because you can swap out personnel in some companies or some in military units, fairly easy if you really wanted to, right? If someone's, a bad, I don't know, company commander, if you really wanted to, you can swap them out. But you can't swap out like the chain of command. You can't swap out hierarchy. It's like inherent in the military, in a particular type of hierarchy. You can't swap out UCMJ. Not that I'm not saying you should, but I'm thinking about this in terms of other business things and stuff you've looked at. And when you think about structure and process and communications and personnel in the approach to culture.
It's a great question. And that balance, I think it depends, it's like dialing in something with 4 or 5 knobs, and some of it's really tough. Like what if knob B just does not cooperate? Like you twist it and you don't get a value because it turns out that knob B is broken or it's the sexier knob to turn, but it just doesn't move the needle enough. Again, a lot of this stuff is big, obvious things once you stop to look for it. So the institution, absolutely. Institutions in general, their default is what I would call an accountability ladder problem, where everybody's looking up the ladder at the person above them, try to satisfy them. Think about this example. If you're a business owner, if you're in a business and you talk about stakeholders, do you ever get past those words, stakeholder? Like, oh, well, this person's a stakeholder because they're important. This person's a stakeholder because they're important. But you never say the word, the customers are a stakeholder. Because if they don't buy this, if they don't cooperate, none of us are important. And so when you look at stakeholder analysis, you really start to determine if you remove ego from stakeholder and you really are working on a problem or a product you're trying to promote or something like that, when you get rid of ego and like, oh, well, this person is important and that person's important, and you really get into who makes a difference, that's going to be the customer's got to be one of the main ones. What can we find out more about the customer? How can we get more data on them? Because then we can all get in line with what they want and need and create the product that works. But that is really hard to do in an institution because you're worried about your promotion. You're worried about your bonus. You're worried about keeping your job. How many people in America right now are like, I don't want to make waves. I just want to keep my job. And they're in no way impassioned about it. And then you think in your company from the headquarters side, you're like, yeah, people love working here. Our turnover rate is low. Maybe because 50% or more of your employees are terrified to do or say anything to jeopardize their position. And all they really want to do is go home and be left alone and take their check. That's not enough. Like how many places have that problem? And that to me, I would want to give that knowledge to a CEO because then they can be like, well, what the heck are we going to do about this? Half of our staff is afraid to innovate, afraid to fix a problem, they're incented to turn the other way. So when you ask me, Bill, oh my gosh, institutional problems right there. I can go on all day about that.
Yeah. It's funny, evaluation is something I think about a lot, and a slight spin, but I think an important one on the value of these questions and the value of storytelling and the value of people is you look at this and say like the NFL draft, for example, or a company. When you look at a company's problems, or you're looking to see what the quality of it's going to be, or you're looking at a person, right? Because it's really the same thing in either recruiting to hire into a company or to bring into a battalion, or, when you're doing these kind of promoting. It's interesting how that human dimension and the capacity to see where those problems are and what problems may be come about. And I'll use the example of Johnny Manziel because it's an easy one,
Right.
not because I'm picking on him, right? But, at a culture level, individuals and companies, right, have cultures and value sets that they bring to the table. And then those value sets interact with other ones and create more or less value overall.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's baffling to me, I've just never quite understood. And I don't know if it's because of you and I really harp on that human part. And that's why we maybe see that it's our strength versus our weakness, but individual personnel or the culture of different companies as a whole or units as a whole. You see this with bad, a terrible platoon or a terrible company or a terrible battalion in comparison to a good one or a good sports team versus not. Anybody who's ever worked in teams like this knows you could take, in a lot of ways, some of the same people and you swap out some of the leadership and some of the key personnel and the culture and like what's tolerated and what's not. And all of a sudden the whole thing changes. And I've never seen teams go from basically the same sports team's players to a different coach and different culture who sets different standards and different expectations. And it's like night and day with almost the exact same squad. But when you're building, you're bringing in new people. And so I'm wondering if you've ever or if you've ever thought about some of these human skills in application to the HR and the hiring process.
Oh, yeah.
And then also with regard to, when you said this, it made me think of it, was the way that companies could be evaluated of what is the likelihood of them continuing, the Uber situation. Mm-hmm. What's the likelihood of success given X toxic culture? Most people on the outside don't even realize how toxic it is because they haven't either wanted to look at it or been willing. Right. And for me, I can see value in people who can look at a situation and say, this is actually a bomb that you don't even know you're bringing on board, that you're bringing on board. And if you bring this on board, it's going to blow up. So don't bring this person or don't partner with that business because I know based on my observation of culture and people, that's going to drag you down. Yeah.
So I want to try to frame this in a way that makes sense. One of the things I hear a lot in corporate America, because they get buzzwordy, right? Like that they try to describe hard stuff. And so they'll latch on to something and it'll take off like an ecosystem or something that's organic. And it begins to mean something other than what it is. And one of those things, and I know you'll appreciate this, is talking about EQ and our emotional intelligence. And again, this is an area where there's flaws because everybody thinks their EQ is high. Nobody talks about emotional intelligence and being like, I can't do it. I don't see it. And so the problem, what is the problem? Well, the problem probably is that the CQ of that organization and their ability to divine who has strong cultural acuity is at best limited or unpredictable. So when you go to hire someone to fit into a culture, if you don't have someone there that has cultural acuity, you're really not even rolling the dice. You're chucking them across the room and you're trying to play craps. And everybody's like, why are the dice nowhere near the table? Oh, because we don't care about CQ, but my EQ is strong. Like it doesn't make sense. So there's a huge incapacity there that an organization could look at. And without overcomplicating a complicated thing, you can start to say, how are we going to account for culture? What are the key 10 questions we want to ask? If it's Uber and you're going to hire people, you can ask as many questions as you want. You can sit down with 10 different people and have them go and think about culture in a way that you can design and get a sense for who this person is. But if the corporate culture is one like Uber, where it was winner takes all, we'll cover the cost later on. It's like the guy that drives in the diamond lane, knowing that the one time a year he gets caught will be worth all of the time that he doesn't. And he can just zip along in traffic and get away with it. It doesn't make that guy less of a dick. It just means that he's willing to suffer the $500 ticket to get however many more hours back at home or to get to meetings faster or to outperform his peers. So it's $500. I don't care. Is that an ethical thing to do? No. But is it unethical? I don't know. I mean, if they're able to validate that $500, okay, but you definitely have a cultural problem there where someone is not following the norm. I mean, the norm is that we all stop for red lights. The norm is that we try to at least be careful when the light turns yellow. And if someone's blatantly driving in the diamond lane by themselves and not carpooling, there's a problem there, and they can probably justify it in some way. If you can't account for that in your company, who's doing the diamond lane driving, then you've got someone making bets, and it could be the CEO. They've got someone making cultural bets with no idea that they're in the cultural casino.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said. I'm curious about the things that everybody's got something that makes them tick, right? And you're naturally lined up in your psychology a certain way. I mean, I've known you for years, and this is like you to the core, to ask said stories. What makes you, I don't see cliche of what makes you curious. I don't mean it on that level. That's kind of base and boring. I mean, is it just wanting to solve problems, or is there a particular, emotional need that you have that's getting scratched when you're working for a company or you're working for the commander and you've got this mess of a problem and you're dedicating your life to this kind of stuff. And I obviously I know it's not easy. And so you wouldn't do it unless there was some really deep-seated need to go do it.
Yeah.
So I'm, curious what that is for you. What are some of the driving emotional needs that make you care?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to do nothing, right? But I'm just not wired to do nothing. I am a person who my action verb is do. Let's do this. Let's go. And that's where my idol is set. Like, what can I do? And believe me, there's plenty of times when I'm lazy. And for a long time, and I don't know, this may or may not resonate with you because of what I know about you and how you're always pushing development on yourself. But for a long time, I would tell my friends, my civilian friends, I would say, you wouldn't recognize me in a combat zone. Not because I'm all like tactical and have a giant beard. Yeah, those things for sure. But I'm very type A, very aggressive. In my regular life, I try to keep it a notch or two below arrogant. Fail at that a lot, but I try to keep it a notch or two. So like confident, maybe even overconfident. But in a tactical setting, it's a totally different game. I'll outwork everybody. I mean, as a guy doing what we did, I regularly outperformed the rest of my team combined. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that to brag. It's just to try to give you an illustration of my ability to saddle up and get to work and get to where the important things are. Well, everybody else is trying to write a syllabus or try to figure out, like, here's my action plan. Like your action plan, my action plan was go, do, write, and repeat. And so I would go out. I mean, nobody's patrolled more than me. No, nobody. It doesn't exist. I mean, I've been out too many times, asked too many questions. So that is my natural setting. So when I am home, and that started now with the podcast to merge, where I treat it like I'm in a combat zone because it is what I do professionally. And so part of the reason why I do this is not that I'm type A. I'm like a passive alpha, like I don't have to be the lead dog. I've led teams before. I'm glad to help you do your vision. I'm glad to do it. I don't have to lead the whole thing. I can, but I don't need that. What I need is access to the battlefield. Mm-hmm. You give me access to the battlefield, you will get back more than the rest of the platoon combined in terms of value. So if a company wants to hire me and just turn me loose, I'm glad to work on a price that makes sense for them. And then I will start writing reports and they will start to see their company in a whole new light. All I can tell you is that's just what I do. That's what I am. Some people are music. Some people are novels. Much as I want to write a novel and a screenplay, what I am is what I am, and I'm not that.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. All I can tell you is that's just what I do. That's what I am. Some people are music. Some people are novels. Much as I want to write a novel and a screenplay, what I am is what I am, and I'm not that.
Is it efficiency? Is it stability? Is it equilibrium? Is there some, is there a pattern with these things? Okay, so the stories, mm-hmm. or the mission, the thing the problem you're trying to solve, or the story you're trying to tell. Is there a pattern in there of what those things are? Is there an imbalance that's trying to be corrected? Is there an inefficiency that's trying to be fixed? Is there a knowledge that's trying to gain? Is it a perception that's not gathered that you're trying to rectify? Maybe there's not, but I'm probing to see if there's a pattern, if you thought about it in any way in that frame, if there's a thing or a series of things. It's like, because there's people who are crazy efficiency folks, and they like go around like their obsession is, I can't stand inefficient stuff. And then they just are really good at like, they tend to be OCD types, right? That just have to have it be just so. Yeah. And then the people who are the sort of the equality types. So, we need to balance out humanity and equality and it could manifest itself in many ways, but fundamentally they're a person who's driven by balance and uniformity amongst people because of a sense of justice, let's say. And I'm curious if there's any pattern in the stories that you've chased and the problems that you tend to chase.
Like politically, I look for balance. Maybe it is that I'm a balanced person. I do like the middle, and I like to have, because we can get things done in the middle. And maybe that's what it ultimately is I'm looking to try to rally people somewhere in between everything else. Like, you don't like President Obama, but could you take it if he was president? Like, can you withstand it? Or is it just too much? And you try to find a reasonable balance so you can find an efficiency and room for people. Because if you don't got room for anybody, then why do we have room for you? Like if you can't tolerate something, then you're intolerant. So I think I try to look for a social balance, maybe, is what I do. And I'm not sure that that's the actual answer, but that's what comes to mind, is that I'm looking to try to balance imbalance and trying to find ways to create efficiency, not in terms of, this system or that system, although I can look at an organization and see those things, but there's a puzzle aspect to that with me and a human problem. And it's something that, I play those notes well. Mm-hmm. And so every problem I see is a social problem because I play those notes well. And it makes sense to me to go ahead and look for those kinds of answers because, it's what I am. It's what I do. Okay.
Give me two stories that if you could have those stories right now, what are two stories that you would just love to have? That you'd love to either via podcast or via documentary or whatever form, it doesn't matter. But what's two stories would you want to dive into?
Well, okay, there's one that I would love to figure out how to do, and I've not figured out how to find the money to do it. And I would love to go around the nation, and this will go right back to what we just talked about. And I would like to call this project The Story of Us. But the us is U.S. It's all of us, right? Because we've gotten away from this, and you and I both know, like, having 55, different political parties isn't the answer. Calling each other a Nazi is certainly not the answer. All of these things that make us something other than us, I think is partly solvable by just learning who the heck us are. I mean, we're really rough on the South, really, really, really rough. And in some ways, they deserve that. They've done some shitty things to people over the years, But in other ways, we're so ignorant about what the South is and the good things about the South that we often dismiss who they are and what they do in a way that's, honestly, just as bigoted as what they do. Because intolerance and bigotry, those things are synonyms. So I would love to do that. I would love to go tell us the story of us.
Yeah, I like that story of us. U.S. medium, if you were going to tell that story. I know you said you hadn't figured out about how. Is that a documentary? Is that a series of traveling podcast interviews in different regions with different folks over the course of 3-6 months? What possibilities have you thought of? What do you think would convey that the best?
Well, look, what I want to do and what I can do are two different things, right? I mean, I would.
Well, you never know. We might have a listener who can just donate and actually make that happen, right?
Yeah.
So we're aiming big here, brother.
If I had a bit of a budget, yeah, I mean, I would do video, and I would basically make it a documentary of sorts, or some sort of documentary series that you could sell to Netflix or whatever. I know that seeing that person in their environment, seeing that grandma with their oxygen tank, who's just full of love, or could use a hand up. We could all have a lot more empathy. We could feel different emotions than just, it's easy to say so-and-so does this and have no fucking idea what you're talking about. But when you sit down with that person, the person that you hate, in a vacuum, and you have to deal with their reality. One of the things I've learned along the way is that you don't want to trade problems with anybody else, because they're the only ones uniquely built to do their stuff that they're doing. And you probably couldn't handle their problems. And oftentimes they're much worse. Like, oh, I've got cancer. Well, let me introduce you to somebody who wishes they had cancer. Yeah, I would want to do it in video.
Do it in video. And then the idea is then to, you said maybe one avenue is push it to Netflix and something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So for you, because, you're the storyteller guy, do you see that? I'm going to intentionally flesh this out a little bit where, you get somebody who's the videographer and you're the interviewer. Yeah. What's that team look like? What do you need to make that happen?
Oh, yeah, pretty simple. Like a lot of it will be done myself. And me, it's mobile, it's a backpack. I'm on the go, I'm out there. But when I hire someone else to help me set things up to make it not be an all day affair. Ideally, Amtrak is smart and they let me ride a train, and I talk about Amtrak all the time. And you just go out and I try to hit 100 towns and then put that into, do an hour-long show, 45-minute show, do 15 minutes on each town, and then you have 30 episodes.
It's like an old-school presidential election from the 1800s, right?
Totally.
You just move from town to town and talk with the people.
Exactly. Yeah, just get out there and go do it, right? And
like politicians claim they do now, but they actually don't.
Yeah, I've been to town halls, and good luck getting your question answered,
Yeah, it's funny because what you just said right there, right, is I think the thing that you and I both observed in rural foreign places and urban foreign places is that understanding people who are seemingly in the same place, the Iraqis, the Afghans, the Americans, the Canadians, they're really so varied. It's almost impossible to have the meaning much of anything as opposed to the diversity that's actually there. And I love it, man. I think that documentary of going around and really recording that diversity in the raw, would be super powerful. You just got to get a videographer and as you said, a forward coordinator to make some of those calls and make it a little time sequence.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
If you had to guess, what do you think it'd cost?
I could do that. I would say super lean. I think I could get that whole thing put together for $75,000. That means I don't have really any money in it, for me. Like, it's just enough to keep us fed and dry. But I think I could get it done for that and have a product that was compelling enough that it would win awards and make people think a little bit, which would be the goal. Like, if getting along is a worthwhile goal, then give me $75,000 and show you who you're trying to get along with.
Yeah. Well, here's something for your listeners. I actually think not only is that an amazing point, I think it would be particularly amazing to be doing in an election year like this. I mean, seriously. And who knows, maybe you got a listener out there that or a series of them that can donate that kind of funds. Cause I'll tell you what, man, I'd love to hear you do that. And soon, what kind of lead time would you need? 3 months, 6 months? How much time does it take to like set up on that?
Oh my gosh.
Track?
Well, I mean, I think I could, once I had the first few set up and I figured the traveling salesman problem out of where I was going, which can all be done fairly shortly. I think I could go out and do 100 cities. I could do that in 120 days. I could do that in 4 months. And then I would need, 4 months of maybe 6 months of post-production time, maybe a little less. But it could be done that quickly. I mean, if you have the money, the work isn't a problem. It's just the money that's the problem. Like making it sound great up front. That's all known. It's being able to have a way to get around with 2 to 3 people and go gather stuff in a way that makes any kind of sense to anybody. It takes time and money.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question is, I ask you the story problem. What's a particular problem? Maybe this is tied in, but a particular problem that you're sort of really would like to dive into.
Well, you're asking me questions that I think I'm giving you the answer you want on this, but yeah, these are things I think about is, what do I want to do? I would love to in a multimedia form, go out and study these are the big issues of our time, right? So I would love to go out and study what for the United States medical care for all looks like, you know, because here's what I know about medical care for everybody. Nobody is in the line that requires the sacrifice everybody has to make it happen. You know, not the insurance industry, not the doctors, not the patients, not the medical providers. You know, nobody's in the line that says, I can give up everything I've got to make this happen. Everybody wants it, but the sacrifice isn't there. So what would it take? And go talk to all the people who are the experts and get them to say, here's how you would do this in my world. And then just see how disparate it is. And then start to find the areas where you maybe could say, well, if that was true, maybe this is the other thing that we could do. And if you guys could do that, maybe we, you know, and just understanding what the problem is, because I don't think we have we know what we want. Everybody wants something different. It's like being president. When I ask people, like, what are the attributes of a great president? It's clearly not experience, even though we say that, because we love President Obama. You know, the guy's absolutely unqualified as a candidate to be president. So it isn't that. We don't like President Trump, who was sort of not really qualified at all to be president. So what is it? And people struggle. So just to show like how different we all are, while we're all still the same, I think in terms of medical care, I think that would be an enormous benefit to the problem of how do we care for one another in terms of medicine, you know, and do it in a way that makes sense to somebody.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing with a documentary kind of format over the course of time, or in a series, or in a single set. How big of a problem, how much time do you think you need to explore that?
That's a bigger problem, right? Because you've got to get all of the stakeholders. And again, I do mean some of the patients too. So to understand the medical insurance problem, you know, the employer problem, the medical provider problem. By the way, if everybody has access to medical care, where are these doctors and physicians, all these resources, these people that you need to do this job, where are they going to come from? You know, because you don't just turn on tens of millions of people having more access to medical care and say, hey, it's no big deal. There's plenty of doctors, because there's a lot of doctors that are like, hey, we're not taking new patients anymore. So there's a problem right there that no one ever talks about, is the capacity to actually find reliable care. You know, what is that? Is that a 15-year problem to go, hey, we're now going to incent people, lower the standards for medical practitioners, and push money into the system so that we can all have more access to medical care? Because that has to be tort reform, and that have to be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting on the medical side. So I was a paramedic for a little while, and you look at some of the things that have changed along that line of pushing stuff down, the nurse practitioner role, right? Yeah. And some of these others that are, well, you don't have to be a medical doctor, but there's a certain level of care that's significant and it's high. Mm-hmm. But like these problems can be dealt with without having someone with 8 years of medical training. They can be dealt with someone with 6 or 4 or, whatever. And the way that, again, go back to structure, the systems are designed. Man, I would love to hear. And as an Intel guy too, because here's the other thing, one of the things that absolutely kills me, and why I cannot stand to watch political debates, is because they're not actually debating. Because debating requires talking about the same set of facts and having different views on the same set of facts. They're using 2 totally different sets of facts so that they talk right past each other and don't actually communicate on the principle or premise of the idea. Yeah. And which is, of course, how it's designed, because they're talking to themselves and talking to their constituencies, not to try to actually persuade others in the opposite party or other people of reality. And so from the storytelling standpoint and the Intel standpoint, not only interviewing those people, right, because they're going to give you their perceptions and their views, and those are windows into truth, as you know, but getting a series of, I want to say neutral, because facts aren't necessarily neutral. They can be more in line with one side or another on a given topic on a different day, but that would allow a legitimate conversation and exploration of issue to occur, right? Where both people on both sides, there's more than 2 sides, but other sides to watch said documentary, to have meaningful exploration of the facts, not the facts of the pundit on a given day in a given debate. 47% of people have lost their jobs this year, and 87% of new jobs have been created. Make sense of that.
What does that even mean?
Maybe both are true. Maybe neither true. Maybe, what would be the connection between those 2 points, right? And so, yeah, I would love to see that documentary, man. The interesting problem, why healthcare? What's the drive for you that says, I want to deal with the healthcare?
I think it's solvable if you get the right people involved. And who I'd want to talk to at the top of the pyramid is like, the guy who solves most of the supply and demand problems in this nation is Jeff Bezos. I would love to hear his thoughts on how he solves this problem. Because if it's not a corporate answer, if it's not a capitalistic answer, then you have a lot of barriers to overcome in terms of how America solves its problems. I don't know that it's worth our time to try to avoid that reality. Why couldn't Jeff Bezos fix that? Like, why not? That seems like that's perfect for him. Just to say, I'll be back, and then
come up with a solution. Yeah.
Let the I don't know, the best businessman of our time, let him solve it. I don't need half his money when he dies. I need him to solve problems for as long as he's alive, because he can solve impossible things at a rate that's greater than, him and Elon Musk. Those guys are incredible. Just him and his friends to figure it out. And then a subscription-based medical care program comes out, and then here's how you do it. And if you want more, you get Prime. And if you want even more than that, whatever, right? Like, I'm positive, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm not trying to suggest that's the answer, but those guys have ideas that are going to change how we see this problem. And of all of the problems I see out there that we deal with day to day, this seems to be one that continues to come back. Social Security goes in and out of vogue. Immigration goes in and out of vogue. It's an issue today, but it won't be an issue tomorrow. It'll be something else. Today, it's forever wars and how we want to get out of them. But those things are all sort of trendy. Medical care, especially with the baby boomers hitting that point in time when they're in the zone where a lot of them are going to need daily care. We need to figure this stuff out. And then when the millennials come down the pipe in 35 years, and they're in that zone, we need to figure this out because it's not going to get cheaper.
No, it is not. It seems like in both of these ways, the documentary or the visual video, I don't know, again, short form documentary and the single 100-minute episode versus the series episode, seems to be, I've heard you say this a couple of times now. Is that because you can visually capture the person that you're talking with and capture those emotions? Or why have you said that?
I want to put the camera on your shoulder when we go to Afghanistan, because what you see is incredible. What the writer thinks up in a Starbucks in Culver City is fascinating. And the words are perfect all the time because they're great at that. But you and I both know that dude or that chick can't go sit in some valley in Konar province, come back alive and enlightened, So the same thing is true here. If I was to go into the Tennessee Valley and start knocking on doors, I'm going to find reality that you can write about later on when I'm done and make a story about how incredible it was. But nobody has that ability that you and I have. Nobody. Hardly anybody has that ability that you and I have to go out and have that one-to-one interaction. And I don't want to deny people that reality, that truth. I want to bring ground truth to a higher level, but I don't want to compromise the ground truth to do it.
Well, it goes back to one of your original comments in the talk about wanting to ask the uncomfortable questions and uncover the uncomfortable truth.
Yeah. Like, this is our reality, If we can choose to ignore it, we can get mad at each other. You can call me a Nazi, but after you're done with that, let me know, because here are the problems still. These things remain. And I'm a really big proponent of finding where the work is. Where is the work? I want my partner to do X. Yeah, but they're on F. So do you want to focus on X or do you want to focus on F? And I know that is a lot of that reality out there for us. Just going out and just looking at people in the face and finding out where that work is. You know, when someone's like, my girlfriend won't do this. All right. Why do you think she won't do it? 'Cause she's a bitch, you know, or whatever it is. Like,
Sure.
That's probably not the case. There's probably something else there. Back up, make it simpler. Where is the actual work at? Like, maybe you need to spend more time with her, listening to her. And that in and of itself, as you try to get more into what your girlfriend needs, you will start to be more attuned to her and start to fix some of those problems.
Back to the human dimension.
That's what I do.
It is. And do it well.
Thanks, man. I
And do it
appreciate
well,
that.
man. Yeah, brother. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I'm consistently surprised at the clarity, even after all these years, like the clarity of the ways you communicate and think, the infrastructure of the mind. It's one that popped out from today.
Yeah.
Anyway, just awesome. I don't know what I can do, but I definitely, man, would love to see somehow, and I want to push it because I would love to see that. Those two documentaries, me personally in particular, the one about the story of us, just because in the US, because I think it's insanely pertinent because most folks don't travel outside of their norm for any length of time.
Yeah.
And whether their norm is I'm, wealthy Northeasterner, or whether their norm is I'm a average Midwesterner, or whether their reality is I'm a whatever, you name it, socioeconomic distinction, racial distinction, ethnic distinction, age, whatever their demographic subcategory sector in the grand matrix is, typically don't get outside of it in any depth. And so, you meet somebody, or somebody at church, or somebody at work, or somebody at wherever, and them kinda, but like usually like hangs out with like, and as a result, the truly crossed conversations don't happen. Mm-hmm. And I think, you've heard me say a million times, I'm going to guess you probably agree, but to me, the greatest national security threat is actually internal.
Yeah.
And the disunity
that
exists. And ironically, it's the stuff we're doing to ourselves that is at the heart of that. And I would love to see that documentary to kind of highlight who we are. I want to encourage you to get after it. I don't know how we do it.
Well, I'll ask around.
Serious.
It's a project that can be done. I just, I have to make time in my schedule. I have to produce the shows. I sort of have a verbal contract with everybody that I'm going to put these things out. But now that I have someone, we hired this guy, Damien, in Macedonia to edit shows for us. So now that he exists, I'm going to take this time and go out and try to find some of these people, because you're right. And I'm a big fan of using the prefix mis. So like, like miscomfort. It's not discomfort. You just don't know this comfort. So you have to hear someone's reality so you can go, okay, I don't have to like it. And this is our job, right? I don't have to like what I see. I don't have to approve of the cultural things I see, but I do have to accept them. This is their path. And, they were raised by their uncles. They were raised by their community, and they act this way. This is their reality. And so it doesn't have to be comfortable, but after a while, you're like, yeah, this is how this is here. If I'm to presume to change their condition, I better start from a position of understanding. So in our nation, as we do try to tear each other down and we get more fragmented, I would submit two things. One, there's a whole lot more people in the middle. And if we focus more of our attention there, we could all do a lot more than focusing on folks like the U.S. women's team were disrespectful to the flag today. Some of them, when they won the World Cup. Okay, that's great. That's sensational. But let's go find 25 people that agree on something that they can fix. Like, you don't like how veterans are treated? Everybody send me $25. I will go find 2 veterans and I will feed them until that money runs out. I will change that person's life today. Or we can complain about some girls in France who didn't care about the flag because they're mad at. I would rather focus on the bigger things that we can all do. And I guess that's just submitting one thing, because I forgot what the second thing was going to be.
It's all right, man. Yeah, we got to find some people to do that, to get you on the road and get going. I'm glad you got the guy from Macedonia. That's cool.
Yeah.
To help with that editing. And Netflix, I think, is a great idea. Whatever the distribution component of it, whether it's there, HBO or you name it, but like I really, or hey, get Bezos and put it on the Amazon Prime, right? And
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
You can have them bid for it, but I mean, I know you can get those interviews and with the people, right? And with those folks. Well, thanks for having me, dude. I got to tell you, thank you so much for letting me sit here and interview you. It's fun.
Well, I appreciate it.
Learn how you tick, brother. We
all learn from these things, like ticking. And I know I turn the mic around quite a bit and I let people talk to me and everything, but I learned so much here. This will sound ridiculous. I learned so much by listening to myself talk about the things that I know about. Because I don't know if you could tell, but I was completely off the cuff, unguarded. And so when I hear, I'm going to just be like, wow, I said that. Okay. And I'll learn a lot, but you have to, I don't fear those things anymore. I don't fear, if I listen to this in 10 years, I'll probably be like, oh, I won't want to hear it. I'll be like, I don't want to hear it, but then I'll hear it and I'll be like, you know what? At least I was being honest. If I can give myself that and other people can appreciate it, then that's good enough.
Yeah. It's funny. The most powerful thing I think we have is being authentic. I don't know about you, but there's something about, I don't know if it's a certain age or certain place in life or certain set of experiences that gives you this incredible freedom that really is an incredible sense of power about just being authentic. And that authenticity is actually what gives you the greatest power to be effective that you actually can get.
Yeah. Being authentic isn't a license to be an asshole either, No,
that's right. That's right.
You and I are alive still because we're not assholes, because we're quite fortunate. But also we had the ability to find protection in the hardest places in the world. So again, our ability to go out and get a story that no one else can get is really, it's something remarkable, whether it's in the corporate sphere or in literally the most physically dangerous places on earth. We can go out and get something and bring it back. And that's just, it's a rare thing. It's not a thing that SEALs do or Green Berets do better than us. There's really nobody, maybe some reporters here and there, but when the grit and the reality get the most dangerous, the most hazardous, the most challenging, the guys you want standing around, they look like us.
Yeah. It's funny. That capacity to sell and convince, I think is, I always didn't like that word. I don't know. Growing up, I just kind of had a thing where I couldn't stand, quote, business types because I just, chasing money for the sake of money is just never set well with me. I never respected it, quite frankly. Solving problems that leads to making money. Making money is necessarily not a problem. I want to make money, lots of money, but my God, I sure don't live for money. And I live to solve problems and to learn and be curious and find solutions, right? Even if they're not final solutions, they are mitigations to making something better than it is in the current, right?
Yeah.
And I eventually sort of started to think about sales in a way, or small B business, about what we're doing in some ways. And somebody asked me one time, what do you know about sales? I'm like, let me tell you something. I've sold over a dozen people not to kill me who wanted to.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'd be dead.
Seriously.
So that's a pretty big sales trick, let me tell you, as you well know. And so it is sales. It is, most definitely, with a lot on the line, a lot that I care about in my life. And you too.
Well, I mean, and I wanted to say, and I don't want to keep going, but we'll make this into a two-parter, so it's fine. But when you and I sit across from somebody, I'll just talk in my specific case. When I sit across from someone and I'm directly asking them to betray their country, to betray their friends, to give me information, and they say yes, that's the ultimate pitch. To have them go, I want to do this. And I'm not selling them on a big fancy car or lots of money. There may be a little bit of money in it. I'm selling them on emotion. And if you can do that, look out. I should be able to sell everything, but I just don't think business like that. I think about emotions, and while other people have their own specific business minds and everything, I've spent a lot of my time in combat zones talking to people. And so that's how I get things done, is by talking to people, connecting them, finding out small ways to create value for people. And then my existence comes out of that. So hopefully I can make some of these stories happen. Hopefully I can throw some money at you to get your help to go tell these stories, because I can't imagine better people than like yourself, Will, Rich Leday, and myself to go out and do this kind of work, because it's got to be done by guys like us.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't want to say it's politics because I don't mean politics in that what I consider a dirty sense because I can't stand it. But in the time with the sales, like you're constantly either selling yourself, you're getting other people to believe and trust and building that rapport. And at the end of the day, when to tie in your somebody give you secrets and betray their country, so to speak, or betray their countrymen, right, or betray their neighbor and turn them in because they're a threat. Politics boils down to two things: how should I live, and how should we all require each other to live? And it's funny to me I'll just say the idea that you're selling people on a vision to believe in something that's different than what they got. And while people might be, quote, betraying their country, whatever, what it's not even so much their country, I would argue, as much as I don't like the current reality. I like the reality that you're explaining to me better. Yeah. And I want to transition from this reality to that future and make that future that you're talking about the present. Yeah. A great quote, that everybody quotes. That's like my tagline on my emails. Like, care about it so much, of best way to predict the future is create it. And I really do think that in a sales sense too, of convincing other people and building rapport. And it's one of the sad things I think that politicians in fact don't do, which is the very fundamental thing that a leader, not a politician, not a CEO, not a leader of any capacity, whether it's the neighbor boy or anybody else, is the capacity to tell you, look, we can do things better than we are today. We can make them better. It's within our capacity. And here's how we can do that. Join me. And I think that's one really interesting why, again, to tie it back, why I think the documentary idea of meeting and talking with people across this country of their vision for the future, the healthcare thing, all that stuff is like, how can that future be better than ours is today? And what's your take from your vantage point in your little piece of the pie? It's cool, man.
I love it.
And that's
one of my favorite things. This is really not on topic, but since you talked about your email quote thing, that's what makes it germane. And then I'm going to leave you with this, but that you're saying things that are interesting when you make someone's email quote. And so on my buddy Scott Shipman quoted me from a funny conversation in a tweet, and we were talking about San Diego, and I said, quote, "San Diego is like a Vegas grandma. She's hot like a 55-year-old showgirl, absolutely loves a sailor, and smokes only when she drinks, and she's always drinking." That's my San Diego quote, and it's on the bottom of someone's email, so I must be saying something good.
That's hilarious. Are you kidding me? That actually somebody has that as their Twitter.
I'll share my screen with you right now, and I'll show you.
That's classic.
100% real. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for interviewing me. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know we could go for 5 more hours, so we'll just have to plan another session and do this some more. But yeah, man, I'm inspired. I'm inspired to do these things and being able to share stories. This is what it's all about. And sometimes I get to be the subject of the story. So I thank everybody for listening in. Interested in what you all have to think. I mean, if I'm wrong on something, by all means, I don't claim to be right. Heck, if anything, the more I learn, you know how this goes, Bill. You're about to get 2 PhDs. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know the first fucking thing,
Isn't that the truth?
But
yeah.
I'm just going to keep on going, keep on doing, and try to do it with even less ego and more kindness. And if I have the ability to help someone else out, but mostly try to make sure that no one has to help me, but be soft enough and willing to take help because I certainly need it.
Well, thanks, brother. Appreciate the opportunity to interview you and to talk. Look forward to doing it again.